This episode of the Europuck podcast is brought to you by DraftKings. Now, it's not quite time for college basketball to take the scene and their annual March Madness tournament to get underway, but that doesn't mean the fun has to wait too. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is giving all new players the chance to cash $100. All you have to do is bet $1 on any team to hit a three-pointer in any basketball game this week. And if your team makes it rain, you cash $100. I mean, that sounds like a slam dunk to me, folks. This offer won't be around for very long, folks, so head on over to your phone's app store now, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, and get in on all the action. If basketball isn't your thing, though, they also have daily odds on hockey, soccer, and so much more, so make sure you check them out and make it rain on whatever sport is your go-to. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code THPN to get your shot to turn $1 into $100 when you bet on any team to hit a three-pointer in a basketball game this week. That's promo code THPN to turn $1 into a shot at $100 via three-pointer in any basketball game this week. For a limited time, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. A big thank you for DraftKings for sponsoring this episode. Hello, bonjour, hello, hi, heya, and privyet, hockey fans. Welcome back to the Europuck podcast, the show where two Brits talk all things European hockey as part of the Hockey Podcast Network, brought to you by DraftKings. My name is Hayden, or Odd Man Rush, as you can see up there on the video version if you're watching that. And joining me, of course, I don't think anybody's surprised at this point. Come on, it's basically every single week that you're sitting next to me. It's Chris Gadsby. Hey, Chris.
Hello, yes, name's hello.
How's it going?
Busy.
Yes?
Very, very busy with the run-up to ice hockey coming back, and work's busy, and I finished my commentary notes for Sunday's game at lunchtime.
Okay.
So now I've just got to learn the numbers, which is, if I want to... Like, a minimum is 30, maximum is kind of 60.
Okay.
Of course, I don't know which 22 out of the 30 from each team is going to play on Sunday, which also doesn't help.
True.
But yes, I've got my commentary notes here. There we go.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is kind of I've got position, I've got number, name, position, age, history, stats for the current team, appearances for the current team, for each player that might play. So I'm kind of as prepared, I think, as I'm going to be, apart from, as I said, memorising stuff.
But let's be honest, Chris, knowing you would not do it any other way. You know, like,
No,
you love
you know
this.
me.
You love this part of the commentary job. Like, you
Yeah.
love finding all the stats. Like, I've got to be honest, when I'm researching videos and stuff, that's the part that I always find really interesting as well. Like, knowing how well they played in certain leagues, or where, like, all the different leagues that they've played in. And, like, you look at them, you find out a player's played in Italy for 3 years. And you're like, I had no idea that player did that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it has taken me probably about 5-6 hours to do all that. I mean, for the Lions, it's kind of more beneficial. You do question, sometimes, spending 2.5 hours doing everything about Sheffield for one game.
Yeah.
But, can't complain too much. But, yeah, so that's with that and work and all sorts. It's all got very busy. But it was great to be back at the arena on Friday night to do all our tests and everything.
Good.
It felt like I'd never been away. So
Good. How did that feel? Because you did the announcement for the squad for the Lions, and
yes,
obviously,
so it was.
Was that when was the last time you'd been to the arena before then?
The last time before then would have been the last home game, which was the last game of the season. So it was, Jono said it was something like the 18th of March last year. It was like 49 weeks, and it will be Sunday when we play will be 50 weeks since the last game. So it makes no difference a year.
Wow. That's crazy. Like, to think that it's so crazy to think that, like, that much time has passed, but basically nothing's changed in the kind of global landscape and kind of like what we're doing in our lives. We've been doing the same thing.
Because and everything felt normal. Like, you drive to Nottingham, felt normal. park in my same car park in pretty much the same space I always do, normal. The same walk to the arena, normal. The only difference was going in a slightly different door and having a temperature check on arrival. But other than that, everything was just normal.
Yeah. I also felt that about when I went back to the summer camp that I work at for the second year. You notice that like nothing has changed whatsoever, but like you've changed for like you've grown up by a year, and you go back and it's literally like I've gone back in time to the exact point where I was before I left.
Yeah.
But like you're slightly different, but the place, it basically feels the same. But anyway, we're going to talk about the Nottingham Lions in a lot more detail later on. We've got something to talk about. I mentioned it last week. We'll talk about that towards the end of the episode. Let's talk about what's actually going on in Europe. So let's go to the KHL first. Now, like we said, we pretty much know, we're at the point now where we know every single team that's made it to the Gagarin Cup playoffs for 2021, which the playoffs or the regular season ends this Friday, folks. For context, it's Wednesday, the 24th of February, I should say. I always, either I say it right early on in the episode or like half an hour in. So, I wanted to get it out there before we started. So just so everybody's aware, we have all 8 teams from both conferences have finally made the playoffs. So, in the Western Conference, CSKA Moscow in first, St. Petersburg, Dynamo Moscow, Lokomotiv Yaroslav, Jokerit, Dynamo Minsk or Dinamo Minsk, Sharopovets, and Spartak Moscow. So, Chris and I obviously talked about the Podolsk-Moscow showdown, but Chris will take us into more details as to how it happened that Spartak was the one that secured the spot. And then in the Eastern Conference, we of course have the same 8 teams as last week: Akbars Kazan, Avangard Omsk, Salavat Yuleev, Magnitogorsk, Traktor, Baris, Avtomobilist, and Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod as the teams that have made it. Interesting that Yekaterinburg is close to being the 8th seed. They had such a good start to the season, they've really dropped recently. But Chris, we don't really need to go through the standings per se, each of the teams. We now know the 8 teams from each conference that have made it to the Gagarin Cup playoffs. It's now just a question of where they're being placed in the standings. What have you got to tell us about the KHL based on the things you've noticed?
Not a great deal, because I wrote a paragraph about the fight between Spartak Moscow and Podolsk.
Okay, fair enough.
And then last night, with Spartak winning and Podolsk losing, it all went out the window.
Right, okay.
Because I wrote all this yesterday, just hadn't had time to update it today. But yeah, with Spartak Moscow's 6-1 win over Sochi last night and Podolsk losing to Jokerit, Podolsk are now out. So if we start in the West, we know the top 4 are going to be the top 4. Jokerit can't catch them. So we know that, the teams with home and ice advantage in this first round in the West. Jokerit guaranteed 5th. That can't change. Minsk, Sharopovets, and Moscow are obviously the bottom 3. Minsk with the advantage could be, Moscow, Minsk, first round potentially, but the fight is kind of I say for Sharopovets and Spartak Moscow, who have obviously got to try and catch Dinamo Minsk. If you're 7th or 8th, you've got CSKA or SKA, so it's going to be tough in the West.
In
the East, yeah, exactly. In the East, again, we know the top 4. We know Akbars are number 1. That fight at the bottom, Baris in 6th, Yekaterinburg in 7th, and Novgorod in 8th. There's 1 point between those 3 teams, and again, the fight's on to avoid Akbars Kazan.
Absolutely. I would not want to be the 8th seed, considering they are the best team in the league as it stands right now. There's 2 more games to play for both Moscow and Kazan, and only 2 points separating the 2 teams. So who ends up with the regular season trophy? We will have to wait to find out. That said, like we mentioned, all 16 teams have made it to the Gagarin Cup playoffs, which is good. It's nice to know that there's a bit of certainty in that regard. There's a couple of teams that only have 1 game left to play. It's interesting that Jokerit only has 1 game left to play, that yet they were so far back earlier on in the season with all the postponements and things they had going on. They're now actually ahead of schedule. It must feel really weird for them. But yeah, I think all of the teams that have made it to the playoffs are pretty deserving of being there. Looking at the Eastern Conference, Novosibirsk, Sibir did a good job towards the start of the season, but they completely dropped off towards the end of the year. Amur, Neftohimik, and Cologne Red Star were all sitting towards the bottom of the standings for most of the season. Sibir was kind of hovering towards the 6th, 7th, 8th seed, but then kind of dropped midway through the year. So those 4 teams, they're kind of the teams that you'd usually expect to be outside of the playoffs, or Sabir nabbing the 8s is kind of Torpedo and Sabir are kind of the final team in the playoffs most years. And then in the other conference, Dinamo Riga obviously didn't have a very good run. HC Sochi, they didn't have a very good season. I wasn't necessarily expecting them to be out of the playoffs, but they really didn't have a very good year for themselves, all things considered. Then they started trading away a load of their players. And then you got to feel a little bit sorry for Vityaz Podolsk. They got so close, yet they were so far, and they just couldn't make up the difference to get themselves a playoff berth. So now they have 2 games left to play on the season, thinking we were so close, but we didn't quite make it. Anything you want to add on that, Chris?
Not particularly off the back of that, to be honest. As you said, it was all there for that great final game showdown, and then Podolsk just couldn't put the games together to be able to give us that showdown. So yeah, we now know everything, and they start on Tuesday, the playoffs.
So if the regular season ends it ends the day this goes out, doesn't it? On the 26th,
it ends on the 27th. No, it ends on the 27th. So it finishes on Saturday.
Okay, so
the playoffs start on Tuesday.
Okay, so each team has a couple of days to kind of rest up, maybe get a few practices in, figure out, watch some tapes, they know their opponents. I think next week we're going to have to sit there, maybe focus either primarily or predominantly on the KHL playoffs and kind of maybe do like an end of season report for all the teams that didn't make it, and then take a look at the matchups and who we think. We could basically do like a KHL playoff bracket, essentially, couldn't we? So
yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning as well with the KHL that it was announced that Jokerit are playing all their games away.
Yes, good point. Good point.
So they don't have home ice advantage in the first round anyway. But yes, all their games are being played away. It'll be interesting to see how the team they're facing copes with having every single game at home.
Yes, and I guess
imagine quite well.
Yeah, well, it also depends on whoever they're playing, whether they're allowed fans in the arena, because I know certain teams have been allowed fans. It might be a case of all of the Russian teams have been allowed fans after a certain period, because I've been looking through like different images of the KHL, and there's loads of fans in the arenas. Avangard, I know, have had fans in the arena.
We're counting the days down now that we have been given our route out of this.
Yes, exactly.
It does look the current UK government guidelines say no restrictions at all on June the 21st.
Yep.
Which means even if it gets delayed ever so slightly, by the time September rolls around, there should be nothing, and we can have our league back with full arenas. So, this season's a write-off, but the rest of it is we're hoping. But yeah, so Jokerit are having all theirs in Russia. So it'll be interesting to see how they cope with having every game away from home and see how far they get in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that this was decided not just from Jokerit's perspective. I believe the league had discussions with the Finnish government as well, and they wanted to...
they did.
Obviously, Jokerit secured the 5th seed, so they were guaranteed a berth in the playoffs, or they've been in the running for the playoffs for quite a few weeks now. So there's been discussions going on behind the scenes. They probably thought, is it worth the quarantines, and is it worth the different restrictions in place for... Because obviously it might be difficult that if people have to quarantine for a week, it's going to completely bring their season or their playoff series to a halt. So may as well take them to Russia. The good thing is they don't have to necessarily find an alternative arena to play in, like Kunlun Red Star did right at the beginning of this season, because they've played their entire season in Russia this year as opposed to China because of the circumstances. They just have to play where their opponent's playing, which obviously works in the opponent's favour. But then again, Jokerit are a strong team and they can surprise anyone. So if there's any team that has a chance to kind of use that situation to their advantage, I'd say Jokerit is one of them. So anyway,
I'd say they're a strong side, and like just as much as the other team, gets home ice advantage, Jokerit of course don't have to travel as well, because the thing with the Russian sides, of course, particularly over in the West, is that because Jokerit is in Finland, when you play Jokerit, you've got so much further to travel.
Yeah.
It's difficult for the Russian teams going over there, but if you think about Jokerit, who have got to do it every single time, it makes me think like, with Belfast or something over here, where it's slightly annoying, you've got to get a plane over to Belfast when you play, but they have to do that like every other week to come and play everybody else in the league.
Yeah, exactly.
So it might work in Jokerit's favour as well.
And the only difference I'd say with that is Belfast, for example, they only play at weekends. They can just take a flight over for one weekend and, play a couple of games.
The league often gives them double headers.
Exactly. So, play a couple of games, fly home, whereas Jokerit, they might have a game in Finland at the beginning of the week, a midweek game in Severstal or Sharapovets, and then have, an end-of-the-week game in Kunlun Red Star, and it's such a huge geographical location to fly through, but they managed to find a way to do it, and Jokerit have been a successful team, so they must be doing something right. Anyway, let's move on to the next league, because we're going to go into a lot of detail about the KHL next week and the next 2 weeks after that. Let's move on.
We need to race through some of these.
Exactly. So the Swedish Hockey League. Chris, do you want to take us through any important information on this one?
Yeah, so there's not a great deal. Örebro and Leksands, they played each other, and Leksands had climbed above them until Örebro won by a goal to nil last night. So Örebro back where they were. The biggest change is between HV71 and Brynäs at the bottom, who played each other on the 18th, so last Thursday. Brynäs got the win there in overtime and climbed above them by a single point. And then they both lost in overtime yesterday. So Brynäs are up to 11th, and they've got a couple of games in hand. As you can see, it's still very tight at the bottom. It's still just one win separating Linköping's in 14th on 46 points, and Oskarshamn on 49 points in 10th in that playoff spot. Also worth pointing out, again, we're still kind of around 10, 12 games to go. It's a 52-game season in the SHL, which runs until March the 25th, so a month left of the regular season.
Interesting that there is quite literally still all to play for in this league, because like you mentioned, one win difference between the 10th seed and the 14th seed. So, and you've got Oskarshamn, Brynäs, HV71, Malmö and Linköping's all fighting for one spot. And part of you would think, okay, well, Malmö's in the best position here, 39 games played. They have at least 2 games in hand on all the other teams, up to 5 or 6 games in hand on some of them. So all they've got to do is string together a couple of wins and then hold course, and they should get that 10th seed. But, crazy things can happen. So interesting to see that Rögle have played a couple of extra games. They've managed to capitalise on them over the Växjö Lakers. They lost their most recent game, but they'd won 4 games before that. So they've managed to get a 6-point gap at the top of the league. Will that hold for the rest of the season? Once again, we'll have to wait and see. And then kind of looking at the first round bye positions and then the first round playoff berth. I mean, Leksands and Frölunda are still very close. Same amount of games played, same amount of points. Frölunda on a 4-game losing streak, it's probably worth mentioning.
Yeah, and they've been shut out the last 2 games. They haven't scored in 120 minutes of hockey.
Oh, wow. And it's also worth mentioning that Leksands is on at least a 5-game winning streak. So, if momentum keeps going the way that it's going, Frölunda might not be outside of the playoffs, but they're going to maybe lose out on that first round berth, which would kind of suck for all the work they've put in and sitting at the top of the league a lot for this season. But you've got to play an entire season. You can't just bank on a good run unless you're the 2019 St. Louis Blues. So let's move on to the Finnish Liga now, which is playing games at the moment, but I've got the standings up for before the games are played, because I know it confuses things a little bit. So by the looks of it, I'll just take you a quick run through what's going on, and then Chris will give us the more specific details. So Lukko has a 10-point lead up in first place on IFK Helsinki. They've played 1 less game as well. They've won 4 of their last 5 games, although Helsinki have also won 4 of their last 5 games in pretty similar fashion. And then you've got TPS Turku, the Lahti Pelicans, Tapara Tampere, and Eels. They've all got the kind of first-round bye spots. However, Kalpa, Karpa, and Kuku are all very close to that 6th seed as well, and the 5th and 4th seed. Like, the middle of the Finnish Liga is still very close, but once again, still plenty of hockey left to play in the Finnish Liga. Just over 2/3 of the way through the season, I believe, but Chris, feel free to correct me on that. And then you've got you've got Assat in 10th place, and that's kind of where things start to drop a little bit. You've got Vasensport obviously sitting in 11th place. But then after that is kind of, we know some of the teams that are highly unlikely to be making the playoffs at this point in the season. You've got Saipa. Yeah, they're only 8 points back. That's only a couple of wins, but they've already played 2 more games than Vasensport. Hämeenlinna, same position, but 1 point less. Although they have won 4 of their last 5 games and points in their last 5. And then you've got Jukurit and JYP Jyväskylä, both sitting at the bottom of the league. Jukurit's close to climbing up a few places, but JYP way far back from the rest of the competition. That said, they've only played 37 games. They have the chance to at least catch up and make it a little bit more respectable by the end of the season, but it depends how their performance goes. So, Chris, what do you think about the Finnish Liga?
Yes, so my points to say Turku lost a couple of games in the week. Helsinki have now climbed to second. Bear in mind, only a couple of weeks ago, I was saying they were down in 8th place, so they've had a really
Yeah.
good run of things. As you said, the midfield is really tight. It's one win between 4th and 9th, which is why
Wow.
whenever I'm doing the Finnish Liga, I've got. So the Pelicans have dropped 2 places. Tapper have gone up 4. Ilves up to 5th, climbing 3. Kuku up 1. Karpat down 2. It's so messy in the midfield there. As you said at the bottom, there's a 9-point gap between Kuku and Assat. And then, Vassen Sport have got a chance. Saipa, they're 11 points away from Assat. But there's still 21 games to go. It's a 60-game season in the league. It runs through to April the 13th. I think it's the latest league that we cover.
I'd imagine
I will just double check that.
I'd imagine so.
Yes, it is. It's the latest league we cover. So they've got more to go than anybody else at the moment. There is a big drop there between Vasan and Saipa, as you said. Ukarit, yes, they're close to everybody else, but they've played more games than anybody else in the league. JYP, of course, down at the bottom. They've got a couple of games in hand, but they are 24 points away from the playoffs. So they're kind of looking out of it. And, neither JYP or Ukarit are having a good time of it recently.
No, especially 1 point in their last 5 games, that coming in an overtime / shootout loss. So not ideal for those two teams. But then again, you always have to have teams at the bottom of the league. And like you mentioned, I would imagine the fact that the Finnish Liga had to take a 2-week break has obviously kind of postponed or pushed back their season. So by the sounds of it, they've got about 6-7 weeks left of the season. So once again, nothing set in stone with the Finnish Liga. Obviously, we're starting to see some pretty big gaps. But I feel like that log jam right in the middle of the standings is going to be very interesting to watch. And the good thing is Chris is keeping a good eye on it as he goes along. So that I would not be able to tell the difference from 1 week to the next in terms of all the different positions that these teams have moved if you didn't bring it up. So that's why I have you around, Chris. You're helpful, So let's move on to the Swiss National League now, shall we? Now, wow, EV Zug have really taken the lead in the Swiss National League, and they still have games in hand. So as things sit right now on Wednesday, the 24th of February, 86 points in 38 games for EV Zug, 5-game winning streak at least. A couple of them have come in overtimes or shootouts, so not the full 3 points in every single game, but they still have 2 games in hand on both Zurich and Fribourg Gotteron, who are sitting in 2nd and 3rd place, both with the same amount of points also. So they've got the potential to go, I don't know, another 6 points would put them at 92, almost 20 points ahead of the competition. So it really is Zug's season to lose at this point. Whether they can keep that up for the rest of the season, who knows? The season's obviously getting on a little bit. Then you've got Lausanne, HC Davos, who have kind of risen from the flames like a phoenix over the last few weeks, and HC Lugano taking the final kind of first round bye spots. Then you've got Geneva Servette HC, BLBN, Rapperswil, the Rapperswil Jona Lakers, Ambry Piotta taking the first round playoff berths, although there's a huge gap between Biel and Rapperswil. Then you've got SC Bern starting to get up there. They're starting to win some of those games. They've gone on a bit of a solid run recently. 4 wins in their last 5 games. They've got plenty of games in hand. They're only 1 win away from clinching a playoff spot. So it goes to show you that SC Bern could be sitting at the bottom of the league all season, get a couple of games in hand, do kind of similar to Davos, but even more so, rise from the ashes like a phoenix. Because let's be honest, some of these teams, they've got almost 9-10 games in hand on. So that's a potential 30 points. That puts them right up there in the running. Will they win all of those games? I think we need to wait and see. Interesting to see Lausanne have got points in 4 of their last 5 games. However, 3 of those games have been overtime or shootout losses as well. But yeah, it really is Zug's league to lose at this point. What else do you want to add, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, so there were games last night which kind of threw everything I've said into disarray, really. But, it is, what it shows is just how tight it is. So there are 2 points between Lausanne in 4th and Servette in 7th.
Wow.
So, the fight for that first round bye is really hotting up. And as you've already said, and I wrote down in my notes, the big story is at the bottom. SC Bern, 3 wins since our last week recording. They're not bottom anymore. They've still got at least 5 games in hand on most of the teams around them. Okay, they've only got 2 on Servette, but they're not going to catch them anyway. They've got 5 on Ambry Piotta, and they're only 1 win behind them. So I would expect to see Bern in the playoffs in some form or another. You've got to remember that for some of these teams, if we take Rapperswil, for example, they've only got 11 games left. It's a 52-game season in the National League as well. That runs until April the 5th. So, 5-6 weeks to go in that. As I said, we're getting to the exciting time of the year. I think we should expect to see Burn in the playoffs in some form or another.
Yeah, I would imagine so. But then obviously that means which team is the one that drops down to the play-out, although that's not happening this year in the Swiss National League, as we mention every single week, because if I don't mention it every single week, I will forget when it's a relevant piece of information.
I mean, given the 14-point gap between Rapperswil and Biel, and then the 5-point gap between Rapperswil and Ambipiotti, you're looking at those two teams either in the 9th or 10th spot at the moment, because it's a very, very big ask.
Yes.
For someone like Biel to drop essentially 22 points when they've only got 42 to play for, so they'd have to lose well over half their final 12 fixtures to drop down there. So I think it's going to be one of those two teams in 9th or 10th, Rapperswil or Ambipiotti.
Yes, absolutely. Although crazier things have happened. Could we see Bern completely crash and burn again like they did at the start of the season? Maybe. Could we see Rapperswil steal it in the last game of the season? That's the great thing about sports. You can't predict what's going to happen unless you've gone to the future. So let's talk about a team that's still very much stuck in the past in terms of how far their season is along compared to the rest of the leagues in Europe. The German DEL. Yay! So still very early on in the season. There's 18 games played by the majority of the teams, some of them 17, and then you've got Feiniger on 19, but we'll say 18 for the most part. In the North Division, you've got the Berlin Ice Bears taking an 8-point lead already on the season. That said, still very early on. Points in 5 straight games. You've got Bremerhaven, Dusseldorf, and the Wolfsburg Grizzlies. Only 1 point separating those 3 teams, but they all have secured themselves, so far, a place in the playoffs in the North Division, although still very early on. The Iserlohn Roosters, the Cologne Sharks, and the Krefeld Penguin are sitting outside of the playoffs at the moment. There's a 7-point gap already that's opened up between the Grizzlies and the Roosters, and then a 6-point gap, and then a 7-point gap between the Grizzlies and the Sharks. And then the Krefeld Penguin, oh my lord, they're still not playing very well this season. They have not turned up to camp ready to play a season of DL hockey by the looks of it, and it shows on the standings. Then in the south, you've got Adler Mannheim already with a 9-point gap on Ingolstadt. With 5-game winning streak for them. You got Ingolstadt, as I mentioned, the aforementioned team in second, with Red Bull Munich, same amount of points, same amount of games played, very close there, so that could switch positions very easily. Then you've got the Augsburg Panthers in 4th place, although the Schweininger Wild Wings are only 2 points back from them, but they've played an extra game. Then you have the Straubing Tigers and the Nuremberg Ice Tigers taking the final 2 spots in the south. I mean, I would say that the South is the far more competitive division by the looks of it so far this season, based on the fact that all of the teams have broken double digits, unlike the Krefeld Penguin. But that said, there's some gaps starting to open up here. We're really starting to see the differences between the teams that turned up ready or have the better rosters at the start of the season to the teams that might not have been as ready or have struggled to start the year. And even the case with Krefeld, we're already seeing a team that has really made it difficult for them to actually be competitive this season. They're already 22 points back from a playoff spot, which I can't remember how many games the DL season is, but I wouldn't imagine there's a huge amount of games for them to catch up in that regard. So, Chris, what do you think about the DEL?
Yeah, so the first section of they were splitting north and south is 24 games.
Right. Oh, geez.
And that runs until March the 15th. So there's only, 3 weeks left in that.
Oh, wow.
I'm not aware of I've just had a look, fixtures are still not yet planned for the north to south game, so I don't know whether they're necessarily going to do it, but I confess I haven't gone on DEL website and properly looked at that yet. So from the last week, the Roosters, they got an overtime loss to Wolfsburg, who are obviously the informed team at the moment. So they climbed above Cologne for that 5th spot. In the south, the Panthers, they beat Ingolstadt and climbed above Schweininger into the playoffs. So, of course, the DEL is very much kind of a bit like the Elite League, as they tend to play more at weekends and they only play 1, maybe 2 games a week. So they don't have as much movement as the Liga, who's playing 3 or 4 games a week. That's the way of it at the moment. So if you look at, obviously, if they are only doing the north and south, which is obviously still an option, you're looking at, Adler Mannheim are already in. Yeah. If you take that basis, nobody else is, not even in the north at the moment, technically. But so it's really time's running out for some of these teams because there is the possibility that, this is it.
Absolutely. So just remind me, because I've forgotten, because we haven't necessarily talked so much about how the DL is being run since they first started up a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
So they're thinking about doing the North-South thing after the 24 games have been played?
Yeah, so what they said is that they'd split it into North and South to minimise travel, to minimise the risk of the whole league shutting down.
Yep.
So you were playing everybody in your conference home and away twice, which is the 24 games.
Yep.
And then they were going to assess the situation at the end in March and see what the current country situation is. What they didn't want to do is plan a whole season and it all go head over heels.
Right. So that there's the possibility that if things are going okay, then they might extend the season even further to more games. Is that what they're thinking?
Yeah. So I believe so. I believe that they would do a home and away, one home and one away against teams in the other division, which would give you an extra 14 games, take you up to 38, and then do the playoffs. If they decide that the situation is not good enough, they may go straight to the playoffs, staying North and South. So then you've only got two teams from the other half of the country meeting each other. The reason they did North and South is that then if there was an outbreak in the South, they wouldn't need to shut the North and what have you.
Yes.
Whereas if all the teams were crossing over each other, then the whole league would get affected.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully the current situation that kind of globally, I don't know how Germany is doing in terms of its vaccination numbers or anything, but hopefully they're in a position where, because we're seeing here that things are starting to look up, we're going to have a few minor things open up within the next few weeks and months. Hopefully by the time they get to the end of the season, they think, right, the situation is okay enough and it's stable enough that we can at least either play the playoffs or extend the season a little bit further and have a bit more cross border competition. So the good thing is they seem to be playing the season. So the good thing for the teams kind of outside the playoffs, the good news is there might be an opportunity for them to play a few more games and pick up a few more points if things keep going well in terms of the current situation in the country. But the bad news is they might have squandered their opportunity already, because who knows, they might decide to go straight to the playoffs and then they've missed out their chance. Well, the one thing we know is the Crayfield Penguin aren't making it. I mean, that's all we've got to say. Yeah. Right, so let's move on to the Czech Extraliga now, which interestingly...
most interestingly.
Yes, because I saw this as I was bringing up the stats before we started the podcast, and interestingly, we've got some teams that have guaranteed a place in the first round of the playoffs, but not... Well, they've guaranteed themselves a playoff berth, but in the first round and not a first round bye. So what you're seeing on the screen, if you're watching the video version, is the 3rd seed down to the 7th seed. They haven't clinched anything yet because they're still in the running to potentially clinch a first round bye spot.
They're so 3rd to 7th have a playoff spot.
Yes.
But we don't yet know where they're going to be. So Trinec, this is why you might be a bit confused as to why 8th to 11th have got arrows but the rest haven't.
Yes.
So Trinec and Sparta Prague are guaranteed the quarterfinals.
Okay.
And 8th down to 11th are guaranteed the first round, the round of 16, so to speak. But so that's why they're there. Mercer, Boleslav, Liberec, Mountfield, Pilsen and Pajbis could get, because there's 5 games to go, so there's 15 points on offer there. So it's still very tight. I mean, you look at Pajbis probably are only going to get into the first round.
Yep.
I mean, for me, it's probably between Boleslav, Liberec and Mountfield for those 2 spots in the first round. And then if you look down towards the bottom, Zlin, 15 points takes them to 54. So Olomouc only need a couple of points from their last 5 games. And of course, if Zlin lose a game, then that's it. And we know who's in the playoffs as well. So that's why there's arrows kind of split.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting, again, to watch this. This runs through until March the 7th, so only a couple of weeks left of this.
Yeah.
And then we'll be able to talk about the playoffs there as well.
Absolutely. It was interesting because when I first brought up the Czech Extraliga standings on Flash Scores, I saw the arrows down the bottom. I was like, why are there the arrows down the bottom? And then I looked at it and it was like...
I wondered if you would twig as to why.
Yes.
So.
I obviously, like, I've just put the mouse over and it says qualified for the round of 8 playoffs. It's like, okay, right. So, but yeah, what I forgot to realise is that then that obviously means that 3rd to 7th have guaranteed themselves a playoff berth as well. It just depends on what type of playoff berth they've guaranteed themselves.
Yeah.
So basically in the Czech Extraliga, there's only one more playoff spot up for grabs. And like Chris mentioned, if Zlin lose a game, then Olomouc
It's very
get it.
unlikely that Zlin will make it. Says Budjovic can't.
Yeah.
It's very unlikely Zlin will. They have to rely on... They have to win every game. Yeah, they have to win every game and...
Hope that Olomouc doesn't.
They have to win every game, and at least 3 of them have to be in regulation just to tie Olomouc.
Yeah.
And Olomouc have to lose all 5 games in regulation.
Yes.
So
it's a tall ask. Obviously, sports are crazy, and you never know what can happen. It might be the situation, although the odds would tell you maybe not. It's really interesting, though, at the top of the standings, seeing Trinec and Sparta Prague. They've been battling it out for that first place practically all season long, and it's interesting to see that we're now getting down the stretch. Trinec have won at least 5 games straight. Sparta Prague have got points in their last...
It's 5 games straight that Trinec have won, but if you go even further back than that, I mean, they've won in regulation 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They've won 12 out of their last 13 in regulation.
Well, because remember, Trinec were the last team, I think, in Europe to lose a game this season, weren't they? Or lose a game in regulation.
The only game in that stretch they have lost was to Sparta Prague.
Interesting. Okay, fair enough. So, by the looks of it, I mean, there's a 4-point gap, which isn't huge, but with only 5 games left, that is a notable gap to fill up.
I mean, it's 2 games, so...
Yeah, and the fact that Sparta Prague they've got points in 4 of their last 5, but they've only won 3 of their last 5, and Trinec have won, 12 of their last 13, so it might be, we might be at the point that if Trinec just keep playing the way they're playing, they'll secure themselves the first spot, or it might be a situation where towards the end of the season, Sparta Prague might be able to jump up and take a few away, but needing to win 2 of your last 5 games when you've got a team that's already hot is a tall ask for Sparta Prague to do, but I mean, they're going to sit comfortably in 2nd place regardless. So if you're a Sparta fan, if you're a Trinec fan, you're going to be pretty happy with the way the season ends up regardless, because you're sitting in with a first round bye in the playoffs. I mean, what more could you ask? Then let's move on to everybody's favourite league and everybody's most logical, not confusing league at all. The Ice Hockey League in Austria / Europe, because obviously they have teams.
Halfway through this now.
Are we already halfway through the round?
Halfway through this winners and losers stage, we are, yes. So I'll very quickly take you through it. So in the winners stage, Bolzano got a win last night over Ferivar 19, so they go back to the top because they had dropped by a place. Klagenfurt are up to 2nd, so they've jumped up 2 places from where they originally started from. Ferivar had dropped 2 places. They're now at the bottom of the league after they've lost 3 in a row. It's relatively tight there. It would be Ferivar have just not done very well in this stage. Then we go into the loser stage, and good for fans of Ben Bounds. The Graz 99ers up into 6th place after a couple of back-to-back wins. Bratislava in 7th, which is where they were. Dornbirn in 8th. They've swapped with Graz. Villach in 9th. And Blackwinds in 10th. Obviously, they're at 1. And Innsbruck are as well. They're down 1 now. So, yeah, it's kind of settling itself out. So we're halfway through in each stage. Hayden's favourite team, Blackwinds Linz, are now still 1 win away from the playoffs. And, this goes through until March the 7th. So, again, there's a couple of weeks left of this.
Okay, so when we do the episode following March the 7th or whatever, we're going to have both the Czech Extraliga and the playoffs of the Austrian League to talk about, which will be a lot of fun. Interesting that Dornbirn have played really poorly in their first 4 games.
Yes, they have. They were 9 points clear of Bratislava in 7th when the season finished. And they are now, as you said, in 8th spot. I mean, a couple more losses their way, and they don't even make the playoffs, despite the fact they were comfortably in the playoffs by a number of points.
Yeah, see, I don't so much mind when. Let's say it's a difficult situation, isn't it? Because obviously I've talked over the last couple of weeks about Black Wings, Linz, and how I don't think they should be in the playoffs given this situation. I think it is difficult because, you know, it gives the teams that didn't play very well a chance, but also it gives the teams that had a really good regular season or a good enough regular season to, for example, in Dornbirn's situation, gain 8 points in the standings. They've only got 4 more points this season, and they've lost 3 of their 4 games. So it's kind of like, on the one hand, yeah, it gives the other teams a chance, but on the other hand, like, if you're Dornbirn right now, if things keep going the way they're going, you're going to be pretty upset with how the regular season ends. Obviously, because it's not just a situation this year, it's a regular thing they do. It's not so much of a, oh, like, this is ridiculous, it's so unfair. It's kind of, this is the way it's done. But at the same time, like, I would be so annoyed to be a Dornbirn fan and have lost 3 of our 4 games. We're sitting in 8th place, or technically 3rd place in the loser stage. And they started with 8 points. Like, they were at least 2 points above Bratislava, who have held their 2nd place position. Graz have jumped up 2 places, but they've played 1 more games. That's worth mentioning. So, as things stand, once all the teams have played 5 games this season, Bratislava and Dornbirn should be tied on 15 if they win those games and if that makes sense within the schedule.
Because that game is against each other.
Right, so fair enough. Yeah, exactly. So one of them will be sitting with either 14 or 15 points. The other one will be sitting with either 12 or 13 points. So it's going to be quite tight at the top of the standings. But once again, that's the 3 teams that got the most points from the regular season results, because Dornbirn with 8, Bratislava with 6, and Graz with 4. And then obviously in the winners stage as well, it's kind of more how you would have expected it to be, except for further AV19, obviously, because they had 1 point, but then they've dropped down to 5th because they've lost 3 straight games, like you mentioned. So it's still like, I'm kind of accepting the fact that this is what it is. I still don't think it's the best idea, but you know what? You know, it's like the stages of grief, you know? Like, I feel like I'm in acceptance now, you know?
I mean, yeah, as I said, I've written down the standings at the end of the main stage, and I've written down what the initial playoff bracket would be. So I will once we've finished this, which is in a couple of podcast time, actually, because this finishes a week on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
So in a couple of weeks' time, we'll go through it. We'll look at this in more detail as well. I think March the 7th, by the time since the Extra Liga finishes, the Austrian League finishes, March the 9th, the Danish League finishes. So we'll have, plenty of leagues to go into detail with in a couple of weeks' time.
Absolutely. Like Chris and I have said pretty much the last month or so, this is where the season gets really exciting. We get to talk about playoffs. We get to talk about do like end of season reports for teams in certain leagues. Because obviously as we go along, we could be like, oh, let's talk about the teams that didn't make the playoffs, how their run was, their like top players and everything like that. And it'll be a little bit more interesting once we get into that and we have those to talk about. Instead of just going through all of the standings across Europe, we can have certain episodes that are dedicated to specific leagues and stuff like that. So
that game in hand that Bratislava and Dornbirn have, they are playing right now.
Oh, yeah.
They're only 2 minutes in and Bratislava have already gone 1 up. So it's really not going well for Dornbirn at the moment.
They are really, I don't know what's wrong with them this year. They're really not playing well, are they?
No.
And the thing was, they were so close to securing a place in the winners stage, as far as I'm aware. They were the closest team.
Well, they were 8 points off at the end, but yes.
Yeah, true. Okay, fair enough. They weren't quite close enough, but they were the best shot that the loser stage group had at that point. So I would not be happy to be a Dornbirn fan, but Graz, you're doing great, guys. Keep Bouncy going. Now let's talk about a league that we haven't really discussed in much detail over the last couple of weeks, but because the regular season ended, like we mentioned last week, the day our last episode 24, I believe, came out, the regular season ended, so we now have some playoff bursts to discuss as well. And that is, of course, the Polish League. Yep. So, I will take you through the final regular season standings for the Polish League, and then I will take you through the different playoff brackets that are available. So we have Tichy in first place, only 2 points separating Tichy and Jastrzębie. 83 points in 36 games for Tichy, 25 wins on the season, 28 total wins on the season, 8 total losses on the season. So, I mean, 28 and 8 is a pretty decent record to have in any league. Then you have Jastrzębie in second place, the 2 front runners of the league. A huge gap between the rest of them and these two. 81 points in 36 games, 28 total wins and 8 losses. The only difference was that Tichy lost in overtime or a shootout, twice more than Yastreby, who didn't do it at all this season. Really interesting that in 36 games they played this season, they never lost in an overtime or a shootout. Either that means they're really good in overtimes or shootouts, or they were never good enough to get there, which is really interesting, even though they were the second seed. Then in third place in the league, you had Torren with 69 points in 36 games. Katowice takes fourth place with 63 points in 36 games. Una Oshvashim, obviously...
Funnily enough, they all played 36 games.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Una Oshvashim obviously taking the fifth seed, only 1 point back from Katowice with 62 points. How did Eliza Sherbatov do in the league? Can you bring up his stats for me, Chris?
Yeah.
While I read the rest of it. Then we have Krakow, interestingly, down in sixth place. They're usually one of the better teams in the league, 59 points. Then you had MMKS Podhale with 57 points, and then Sanok with 38 points. And then the two teams that didn't make it, Zagłębie and Gdansk. Gdansk with only 2 wins on the season, 2-0-0 and 34. They only scored 40 goals this entire season.
I know what that record feels like.
Yeah, and they allowed 191 goals. They allowed almost double the amount of goals of any other team in the league, and they scored almost half the amount of goals as any other team in the league.
I know what that feels like.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll just jump in. Sherbatov, 26 points in 35 games, 11 goals, 15 assists.
Okay, that's not bad.
So the Polish league, as you've just mentioned, did come down to the final day of the season with only that 2-point gap. Yastreby needed to win, which they did, but they needed Tichy to lose in regulation. They need to lose in regulation to get that spot by point outright. Did Tichy do that? No, they did not, because they were playing the bottom side, Gdansk, and they won by 10 goals to 0.
Of course
what a
they
way
did.
To round the season up. Krakow, they jumped a spot in the final day of the season as well, just to go from 7th to 6th. So they've gone from playing Yastreby to playing Torren. Now, the playoffs, they've already started.
Yes.
They started a couple of days ago. We had the first couple of games. Tichy, they beat Sanok. They beat them by 5 goals to 0. So they've had a great start to their playoffs. And Torren, the third seed, beat Krakow by 2 goals to 1. So at the moment, top seed beating bottom seed, which in a league kind of this small, when you consider that Tichy finished the regular season with 45 points more than Sanok.
Wow.
And Yastreby finished the season with 34 points more than Podhale. You kind of accept that, really.
Absolutely. Although Yastreby and Podhale still have to play their first game of the series, so we'll see how that goes.
Torren and Krakow. There's only a 10-point gap there. But,
okay.
Which, explains the closer game. But Tichy with a 5-0 victory to start their playoffs.
Yes. And just to let you know, I've got the quarterfinals, the playoff brackets on the screen right now. So it's Tichy versus Sanok, the first versus the 8th seed. Katowice and Una Oshvashim are the 4th and 5th seeds playing against each other. Yastreby and MMKS Podhale, the 2nd and 7th seed. And like Chris mentioned, Torren and Krakow, the 3rd and 6th seed. So I feel like, Chris, we should probably take a look at the top scorers this season as well. So I'm going to bring them up.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly jump in to say that the first round of the playoff finishes on Monday. So by next week, the first 4 games. So obviously if they're swept, if they finish on Monday, so we could have, some teams already into the semi-finals by next week's podcast.
Okay, fair enough. Now, Chris, you'll be very interested to know, and I think a lot of Nottingham Panthers Elite Ice Hockey League fans will be interested to know.
Mr. Swindlehurst.
No, actually. Zach Phillips. Zach Phillips was the second highest scorer in the entire Polish league with Yastreby. He had 17 goals and 40 points in the 36 games that were played in the Polish league. However, the top scorer award has to go to Hovorka, something like that. I'm not entirely sure. And he scored 21 goals and 49 points. So there were 3 players that cracked the 40-point mark. There were a number of players that cracked the 30-point mark. There were 19 players that cracked the 30-point mark. Most of them are either there's a lot of Polish players, like local players, that were sitting at the top of the regular season scoring. So that's good to see that a lot of their homegrown talent actually played quite well in the league. It's not completely the imports that are doing all the work, although we did have a Slovakian, some Czech players, a Finnish player. So lots of interesting players here. It's worth mentioning that Sherbatov was the 27th highest scorer in the league He was tied with Dupuis and Pettersson for 26 points on the season. Let's find the top goaltenders as well. It might be worth having a look at. Okay, I've only got... Oh, that's top scorers. Okay, I don't want top scorers, but whatever, it doesn't matter. I'd need to find the goaltending stats and go on Elite Prospects and everything. But let's go back to the playoffs. We'll have a little chat about it, although I feel like we'll probably come to a very similar consensus answer. We can do more of a post-mortem, if you want to say it for that, or kind of a roundup of the Polish League next week. We can commit a little bit more time to it, although I think we've covered most of the important parts about it.
To be honest, there's only been the first 2 games and we've covered it. I think next week when, we're 3-4 games into the series, in fact, we'll be 4 games into every series, we'll get a better indication.
Yeah, I meant for the regular season, so kind of looking back at the regular season of the Polish League. So Chris, you've seen the matchups for this playoffs. Based on what you've seen right now, where do you think this is going to go? Let's go for it's kind of a pre-playoff prediction, but obviously a couple of games have been played, but only one game has been played in each series. That is by no means close to being finished. So Chris, who do you think is going to win each series? And then who do you think is going to win the Polish League playoffs?
I think it's probably a given that Tichy will win the first one there.
Yeah.
I would think the Jastrzębie would win as well. As I said, that points difference over the regular season was so large. Torun against Krakow, interesting one because it was only 2-1 in the first game. Torun, I feel like Torun probably need to win their 2 home games, the second of which is being played tonight. Because if Krakow manage to split it 1-1, they've got a better chance at home of taking the points. And then the one that I have no idea about is Katowice against Rashim. They were only separated by 1 point across 36 games last season, so wow. I have no real clue what they're going to do. I'll just look at what they did against each other. I say that. If we go live now, just because it just popped up for me, Unash Rashim are 4-0 up at the end of the second period.
Hey!
Bearing in mind that's away from home as well, so...
wow.
Yeah.
So if I had to be honest... I think I'm going to go with the first and second seed both going through because, like we mentioned, the huge gap between them and everybody else in the league. So Tichy and Jastrzębie going through. And I think for the other 2 series, even though Krakow is 1-0 down, like you mentioned, it was a close game. I'm going to go for the 2 underdogs or the underdog seeded teams. So I think it's going to be Tichy, Una Oswiecim, Jastrzębie and Krakow making it through to the next round. And then I feel like it's either going to be Tichy or Jastrzębie that probably win the whole thing, once again, because of the vast difference in the quality of their teams compared to everyone else. And I'm going to go with Tichy. I know it's the easiest choice at the first seed, but they have had a lot of success over the last few years. They have been one of the Polish League's top teams. They've competed in the Champions Hockey League, have had several appearances in the league as far as I'm aware. So it's not as if this is a miracle run for them. They're consistently one of the best teams. So I'm going to say that Tichy wins it. And those are my picks for the first round of the playoffs. I'm probably going to be terribly wrong. Part of me wanted to go with Jastrzębie if you were going to go with Tichy, but I'm going to stick with Tichy. Why not? What about you, Chris? Who do you think is going to win it?
I'll win the whole thing. Oh, I'm not sure. I think the final is going to come down to those top 2.
Yeah.
So if you're saying Tichy, I'll say Jastrzębie just for the sake of it. It's worth mentioning as well that first round matchup, Katowice against Unash Rashim. In the 4 games they've played in the regular season, Katowice won the series by 3-1.
Wow.
However, every single one of the 3 games they won was in overtime.
Oh, geez.
So
that's going to be close.
It is going to be a really close series. But as I said, Unash Rashim really going for it at the moment. They are 4-0 up in that first game. Tichy in the second game of their series against Sanok are currently winning, although it's only 2-1, so not doing a lot better go at it. And then literally at the midway point, Torun and Krakow are still goalless. So really... they're having a good game as well. So the Polish playoffs, really looking interesting. Yeah,
and it's our first look at the playoffs this season, because obviously Poland was one of the first leagues. I believe it was the second league after the KHL to get started, if I remember correctly, because we started talking about the KHL, and that's when we kind of started the podcast, wasn't it? Like back in September, when things all got started. Yeah. We did like one episode before to kind of get everybody excited about it. And then like a week or so later, the Polish league also started off as well. So it's nice to see that one of the first leagues to start up actually managed to make it the whole way through. and they've got their playoffs started, and we get to talk about some postseason hockey. It's always fun. Right, so we've only got a couple more leagues left to look at. One of them I'm only going to bring up because they have not played in a very long time. Let's first move on to the Danish Metaligaen, shall we? So, still very close in terms of some of the standings.
Danish Metaligaen, yep.
Yes, so we have the Rungsted Capitals up in first place with 91.5 points. Although, having said that, Esbjerg Energy have won 5 straight games. They're only one win behind, well, one win, 0.5 points behind. So they still have a chance, but depending on how many games there are left this season, which Chris will let us know, of course. Then we've got the Aalborg Pirates in third place, Herning Blue Fox, Frederikshavn in fourth and fifth, Sondersjijk and Herlev. Obviously, all of those teams have clinched playoff spots. Then it just comes down to the final spot. And I mean, we've said that the Odense Bulldogs had a difficult mountain to climb. They've got points in 4 of their last 5 games. They've won 2 of their last 5, and the Mighty Bulls have lost 5 straight. So it's only a 2-win difference between these two teams. So, Chris, tell us about the Danish Meta League.
Yep, so Herlev, now in the playoffs, you said it's just that last spot we're after. There's a 2-game gap with 5 games to go. It's the 48-game regular season in Denmark, so it is getting really close. Don't forget, those 2 sides have got to play each other.
Oh, yeah.
If Odense win that game, there's only 1 game between them. And as you've mentioned and I mentioned last week, they picked up 2 wins and 2 overtime losses. They keep picking up points. Rødovre aren't picking up points. So that could go. That game between the 2 is the penultimate game as well. So imagine if they really close the gap up there. So that could get very exciting. But that is pretty much all there is to say about the Danish league.
Yeah, and also given the fact
until March the 9th is the other point.
Right, there you go. So it's also worth mentioning that there is quite a big gap between a lot of the teams in the league. Like, the only real difference we're going to see in terms of the changing in the standings, there could be some change within the top 3, although a lot of them are very much set in stone, and Aalborg have played 1 more game than the first and second seed. The only real major difference could be Frederikshavn and Sondersjijk, because there's only 0.5 points between them, so all it takes is another win and things have changed up. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on these guys. We'll have the playoffs to talk about soon enough with these guys. Oh, we're getting into playoff hockey now, Chris. I'm so excited.
I know. We've only got a couple of weeks of doing these league standings, and we get to talk about playoffs on a regular basis.
It's so crazy how quickly the season has gone, though, hasn't it? Like, we've been doing this the whole way through the regular season for every single league in Europe, all the big leagues in Europe.
We've been doing this 6 months now.
Yeah, that is crazy. We've been doing this for half a year. It does not feel like that in the slightest.
And we've got nothing else to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's on coronavirus lockdowns. The penultimate league I wanted to mention, because we've mentioned it briefly in recent episodes, but because they haven't actually played a game, most of the teams, since February 1st. Yeah, it's the Norwegian Fjordkraft Ligaen.
They were meant to start again last weekend, and then they didn't.
Right.
According to what I can find, it's now early March. So, yeah, still season suspended since January the 7th. Nothing's happened. Let's go on.
Yeah, so not much is happening. Although some of these games do say they took place on the 2nd of the 1st, I believe, or the 5th of the 1st. Oh, yeah, well, no, because obviously that's the... I was thinking of February.
5th of January.
Yeah, so it really has been almost 2 months since the Norwegian League played, and that's making it very unlikely that they'll be able to play as many games as they were hoping this season. Speaking of a league that hasn't played as many games as it was hoping this season, let's go to the French League Magnus. Last but certainly not least, ladies and gents.
Yeah, so again, they still haven't decided what they're going to do.
Of course they haven't. That would be easy.
And I checked literally like 10 minutes before we started filming. They haven't decided what they're going to do.
Okay.
So what do I cover? Well, Nice, they lost again. They've dropped to 3rd. If the league finally decide what they're going to do, they could go down as far as 9th into that play-out round.
Oh, my Lord.
So, yeah, not going great for them. At the bottom, Brancon got their 2nd win in a row. They're closing that gap to the rest of the league. Grenoble and Bordeaux have swapped places. And Cergy-Pontoise have climbed 3 places. Anglet and Amiens, they're both down 2. And Chamonix-Mont-Blanc have gone up by 2.
It's interesting to see some of the winning streaks and losing streaks in the form guide here, because Anglet and Amiens have lost 4 straight games, with Amiens losing 5 straight games. You've got Bordeaux that have won 4 straight games. You've got Nice that have lost 4 straight games, as you mentioned. And then you've got Grenoble that have won 4 of their last 5, and they have games in hand. They could see themselves sitting up as high as 2nd if they keep playing the way that they're playing. So, but...
Yeah, I mean, I want to know what they're going to do about these extra fixtures, because they've surely got to declare them null and void.
Yeah, especially because they've left it so late as well,
Well, yeah, surely the later they leave it, the worse it's going to be, or whether they are just waiting for the end of the season.
Yeah.
And then they're just going to go, Nice, by the way, you're dropping 8 points, friends.
Oh,
Enjoy.
that'd be so irritating.
You were in third, you're now in 10th or whatever, So, but yeah, we're just going to have to see what happens with that. And like I say, I check every week and nothing.
So, how many games do they play this season again? Is it 20 or 24?
It'll be 22.
22. So they've literally got 4 games left in this season.
No, but bear in mind, no, because the 18 that they've got there includes the 5 games that could get 4 games that could get wiped out.
Fair enough.
They go down to 14 games. This is why it's so difficult to report on it, because you've got to take into account that those matches played might get wiped off as well as the points.
French League, figure it out, please.
Sort yourselves out.
Stop confusing us. We know you don't like the Brits very often, but come on, help a couple of Brits out. We're not that bad. That is a look at all of the important news or important standings and league news across Europe. Obviously, we're getting very close to the playoffs with a lot of these leagues. I'm so excited to talk playoffs, and it means that we'll have less teams to talk about as the weeks go on, so we can really focus on, like I mentioned earlier, looking at specific leagues and looking at their top scorers and looking at why teams didn't make the playoffs or the things that kind of killed their seasons or whatever, and all of the problems that they had, like kind of doing overviews of specific leagues and focusing large chunks of the episodes on that. Obviously, once we get to like the conference finals of the KHL and we're like, oh, well, this team's winning this series and they're going to go through to the Gagarin Cup finals, there's not going to be much to talk about for the other like 24 teams.
I get a feeling that when we get give it another month, when a lot of the leagues are in the semi-finals of the playoffs, and we're going to be running through this in 20 minutes and go, well, this is the situation here, that's the situation there. Right,
literally. So, Chris, I believe you have a quiz for me.
I do.
Because to be fair, we've been going for about an hour, so I think it's time for a quiz.
I'm conscious of that. The theme for this week's quiz is, well, I've written in my notes, slightly tenuous. I'm going to go for extremely tenuous.
Extremely tenuous, okay.
Well, in terms of national days and stuff, I couldn't really find anything.
Okay.
Obviously, I wrote this for yesterday. The national days yesterday were National Dog Biscuit Day.
My favourite.
And National Spay Your Pet Day.
I'm noticing a theme there. Give them a biscuit, chop their balls off.
Kind of around dogs and stuff. So I kind of got a few with dogs, and then I've done some Polish league stuff since they're in the playoffs.
Okay, I do love a good dog, so let's do this.
So, okay, the Bulldog is the national dog of Great Britain, hence British Bulldogs.
Indeed.
Which ice hockey team in the league we cover are called the Bulldogs?
Is it, by any chance, the Odense Bulldogs, Chris?
It is the Odense Bulldogs. Well done, yeah. Right, okay. Now, do you want me to be kind or not so kind in this next question?
I think you already know the answer to that question, Chris. I know the answer that you want me to give, so do that.
Okay, so Turkey also has a national dog, the Kangal Shepherd Dog.
Of course, yeah.
Turkey are ranked 42nd in the IHF World Rankings, but what World Championship division are they in?
Oh, so they're ranked 42nd.
That's the kind one.
Okay, so Turkey, I would imagine they are in Division 3A.
Correct.
Hey, look at me.
Hey, do you want to stab at the other teams in the division?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
That was going to be the hard bit, you see.
Okay, the other teams, how many are there?
There are 4 other teams.
Okay, I'm going to just go completely off the book here, all right? I'm just guessing.
Go for it. You won't get any of them.
I won't get any of them?
Well, you might get one.
Division 3A, I'm going. International Ice Hockey Federation, I'm going. Israel. I'm going. No? Okay. That's one of my guesses anyway. I'm going Bosnia and Herzegovina.
No.
Damn it. I'm going with Montenegro.
No.
For God's sake. And my last one, I'm making an IHF all-star team here. And then the last one, I will go with Bulgaria.
No.
Damn it.
The United Arab Emirates.
Of course, a very big hockey nation, yep.
Turkmenistan.
Oh, I see, yes.
Luxembourg.
Ah.
North Korea.
Of course.
and Chinese Taipei brackets Taiwan.
I was thinking China, so I would have been along the right lines, depending on who you ask. But
right.
what I will say is, how many times have North Korea won the division?
Quite a few, actually, I think.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised. I reckon all the people in North Korea know that their ice hockey team have won Division 3A a million times.
Yeah, it's...
and that's on politics.
Yeah. I think they have. They've been... Let me have a look. North Korea... best finish for North Korea twice.
Wow.
2002 and 2015.
So that means they've won 16 times, according to North Korean history. Okay, fair enough.
Well, so no, 4 times they've got gold. Sorry, 4 times.
So that means they've won about 20
4 golds and 3 silvers.
So that means they've won about 22 times, according to North Korea's. Anyway, we're not getting into that. Although I already have.
Right.
What's the next one?
Question 3. Reviewing the Polish Hockey League now. Which was higher, goals scored or goals conceded?
Oh. Goals scored or goals conceded? I'm going to go with goals conceded.
No.
Damn. Okay.
Do you want another guess?
Is it, Chris? Goals scored.
No.
They're the same. They're the same.
Over the course of the season, the amount of goals is the same as the amount of conceded goals.
Oh, fair point.
I was umming and ahhing whether to put that in to try and catch you out, and I'm so pleased it worked.
That's a fair point. I'll give you that. I look like a right idiot now, don't I?
I knew it, and it was either going to go one of 2 ways. You were either going to go for one, and it was all going to be on you, or you were going to go, well, they're the same, you idiot, and I was going to look like a muppet.
I don't mind taking the fall on this one, Chris. I look like a muppet all the time anyway.
We know that Dansk are far away from pretty much everyone else in the league, other than the fact that Elite Prospects map is wrong and they're not as far away as we first thought. But anyway, which 2 sides that are meeting in the first round are furthest away from each other?
Oh, that's a good question.
You can go and have a look at the brackets if you want. But,
I have no idea of the geographical locations of Poland, I've got to be honest. Geography was never my strong suit at school.
No, mine neither. I dropped it.
Yeah, I dropped it in like year 10. I was like, I want to do music instead. Yeah, I was like, I'm going to do history instead, which I find far more interesting. Can you tell with the videos I make on my channel? So I'm going to go with the Krakow series.
Which one's that again?
It's Krakow and what's the other team? Torun.
Not Torun. Torun. Oh, correct. Yes.
Hey.
425 kilometers by road.
Okay, not too bad then.
Okay, so final question. Again, as you can tell, I was struggling this week because the links were very tenuous. What was Dansk's longest losing streak?
We talked about a really long losing streak that they had at one point in the season, didn't we?
We did.
I feel like it's...
They played 36 games.
Yeah, but they only won 2 of them. So, I feel like it was something like 18 games. I want to say 15 or 18 is my guess.
Well, pick one.
Oh, Chris. Does that mean one of them's correct?
I'm just saying pick one. You can't have 2 numbers. Otherwise, you could say it could be 1 or 2 or 4 or 6.
Yeah, but when have I been that indecisive, Chris? Come on. I'm going to go with 18.
Yes, 18. Well,
it's actually... Oh, my God.
It was the final 18 games of the season. I was really hoping you'd go for 15.
To be honest, I had some pretty good lucky guesses there. I lucky guessed the final 2 questions.
2... You got 4. You got 4 out of 5.
Damn, look at me. And 3 of them were guesses. The only one that I actually knew for sure was the Odense Bulldogs.
4 out of 5. That's your best performance to date.
Oh, it only goes downhill from here.
Next week.
It's only going downhill from here, Chris.
I'm going to make them harder next week. Have I got a theme for next week? Let me know.
Oh, how exciting. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about on this episode of the Europuck podcast is this piece of news that I mentioned last week, or this thing that you can look at that I mentioned last week. And that is obviously related to Chris going back to the arena. There has been a GoFundMe set up for the Nottingham Lions for their streaming series. It's obviously not compulsory. Like Chris mentioned last week, they're playing games for free. They're streaming them for free on YouTube, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as we were last season, the games are being streamed for free. So the National League are charging like £12 a game in some cases to watch. We're streaming. To be fair, so we're streaming it free. In fact, all of the teams in our mini cup are streaming for free, which is great because I'm going to watch and do some scouting on the other teams when the Lions aren't playing. But yeah, so what we have done is set up a GoFundMe for just kind of help support grassroots hockey it feels weird to me saying grassroots when it's on ice, but
water roots.
Grassroots, yeah, in hockey in Nottingham. So if you do, enjoy the stream with myself and Jono and potentially some guest commentators as well, which I'm keeping zipped on for now.
Ooh.
I know. Then put in kind of whatever you feel you can or would like to for the for grassroots hockey in Nottingham. We're playing an awful lot of juniors, sticking to the Nottingham Lions ethos. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 of our 30-man roster are 18 or under.
Wow.
So, yeah.
You're basically like the Ottawa Senators of your league. Although I'm not sure you're going to win as many games. Or I don't know. I'm hoping that the Nottingham Lions do a good job because obviously
I'm hoping as well. So yeah, if you go onto YouTube and type in Nottingham Lions, our first game is Sunday 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Then yeah, you can hear me, and if you're not fed up with me by this point, yeah, you can hear more of me and watch some free ice hockey as well.
Damn right, I know I'll be there. I'll probably have it sat on my desk while I'm doing some editing for my weekend video, which will be very nice. And I'll be able to hear Chris's lovely voice. Yeah. And I'll be able to, watch the Lions play. Why not?
I'm just looking at the quiz themes that I could do next week, and there are some corkers.
Oh, why you got to go and say that, Chris? But yeah, anyway, so if you just
have National If Pets Had Thumbs Day.
What is up with the pet days at the moment?
I don't know. What you'll like is National Egg McMuffin Day.
Oh, that does sound pretty good, I'm not going to lie. Although, I must say...
Yeah, next week.
Although I must say that my girlfriend has currently got me on keto, so this is fun. I'm having a great time. Although the egg would be nice, I probably can't eat the muffin. Yay for no carbs, am I right, guys?
Hey, you're enjoying it. You've come over to the diet side.
I'm on day 2. And I haven't wanted to die yet, so it could be going a lot worse.
We're on like day 40 or something, and the temptation not to eat junk food is getting lower and lower.
I've got to be honest. Like, the temptation to eat junk food in my life is a pretty constant thing. So the fact that I've even lasted this long, the fact that I've lasted this long, like I've literally got some Ferrero Rochers that I got for Valentine's Day sitting in my room, and I'm having to like give them to other members of my family to be like, I don't need these anymore. Please take them away from me. But anyway, it's going okay, so I can't really complain. But yeah, I think that is a perfect place to end this week's episode of the Europuck podcast. We've got to be honest, there weren't really a huge amount of topics for bonus clips this week. The only thing that we could really talk about is the Lake Tahoe situation that took place in the NHL last week, because anybody see that? That was ridiculous, because
we started watching it, and then it was like, it got ridiculous, and then they went, we're going to restart at 9 p.m. Pacific or whatever it was, and then basically all British fans en masse went, that's 5 a.m. our time. Nope. Yeah,
or they woke up early to watch the rest of it. But I think the difference between goals was exactly 9 hours on the dot, I think was what it said, like time between goals. And then obviously one of the, I think it was the Vegas players, or was it? Oh, I can't remember which player it was, but they ended up taking the longest minor penalty in NHL history, of course. Because could you imagine
there's a video for the future?
Yeah, exactly. Could you imagine if they sat him in the penalty box for the entire time? It's like, you're not allowed to move. Just like have a little nap in the penalty box. I can't imagine how frustrating that must have been for everybody involved. The ice crew that were probably getting an absolute like bollocking. Like behind the scenes being like, you've got to make sure this ice is okay. Gary Bettman saying that the sun is the NHL's only enemy, which is like, you would never expect the commissioner of a league to say something like that. You have the players that unless they said, like, we're taking an X amount of time break, they were probably just, like, sitting in the dressing room, like, waiting to go back on the ice, which lasted for 9 hours. And then, obviously, the broadcast
they were
crews,
given a time in the end, but it just makes me feel happy that, like, we had a game in the second tier here in this streaming service that was delayed for a bit while we waited for the ice to freeze. And it's probably the only time that the second tier ice hockey in the UK has a, like, link with the same problem that the NHL does. So.
Only time that our league has something in common with the NHL. But I think we've got to give absolute props to the broadcast guys that were there the entire time. Like, yeah, they might have replayed the first period of the game, but also at the same time, you know, like they had to keep everybody entertained. And I was watching the hockey guys video on it because I didn't actually watch the game because, like Chris mentioned, it was started up at 5 o'clock in the morning again. I'm asleep, you know? But one of the guys on the broadcast crew, like, they hadn't spoken to him in like 30 minutes, so he decided to just go down to the beach and chill out for a little while. Like, I love that. It's they fully embraced it.
I've done nothing to that extent, of course. It puts me in mind of when, like, there's a rain delay in the cricket and you just got to fill for, like, hours.
Yeah.
The longest I've ever had to do is 25 minutes on the radio when a football game I was commentating on, somebody really badly damaged their knee and they couldn't move them until, like, the stretcher arrived on the ambulance. It was, like, 25 minutes to something. So that's the longest I've ever had to fill. I couldn't imagine trying to do it for that length of time, though.
Yeah, 25 minutes is like a good enough amount of time to delve deeper into a conversation, especially like about the play that you've seen on the pitch.
There's only so many times you can, like, describe the scene around you.
Oh, of course, absolutely. But like 9 hours where they had to sit there and try and fill the gap. And that must have been such a nightmare for the TV programming as well. But anyway, it's not our problem. What does it matter? It was a funny incident, and some of the pictures they got from that event were beautiful. Like the sunset in the background of the Philadelphia Flyers Boston Bruins game looked really nice. But anyway, you know, that was a fun event, and I think that's a perfect place to end this week's episode of the Europuck podcast. Thank you for watching/listening, everyone. We really do appreciate it. If you want to keep updated on all things Europuck podcast, if you want to send us your thoughts, opinions, or questions, either from today's show or for our next show, then you can follow us on Twitter at OddmanRushYT or on Instagram, OddmanRushYT. Once again, thank you again to DraftKings. Use the promo code THPN, and you can get yourself a bit of money, and you can bet on some fun sports. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, if you enjoyed listening to either of or both of your hosts today, which we kind of hope you did, it's been over an hour now, then you can follow myself on Twitter at OddmanRushYT or Chris at Chris_Gadsby. Thanks again for listening, guys, or watching, whether it's the video, audio version. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. Have a good one, folks.